Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, March 17th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me today are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, the Trump administration had a very busy weekend. Among other things, they deported 261 illegal immigrants to El Salvador, including 137 Venezuelan gang members. U.S. District Judge James Bosberg, I think I got that name right, issued a temporary block of these deportations on Saturday, but the planes left anyway. Lots of questions about the timing of all this, but it's clear that the White House doesn't believe the judge has the authority to stop this sort of thing. So, Tom, what do you make of this? And is this clash between the courts and the White House coming to a head?
It is coming to a head. And, look, the Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act, which is a 200-year-old law, to basically execute this deportation, this mass deportation of mostly, or a lot of, sort of illegal criminal Venezuelan gang members, right? And by the way, I've got a separate rant on the media and how they just portrayed. I posted some of the stuff to X over the weekend. You know, the AP headline was just immigrants, and I think News Nation had a headline just these were just migrants, right? With no other descriptor other than Trump deports, tons of migrants, despite judge order, not allowing
construction workers.
Yeah, that's yeah. But listen, does the judiciary do these judges have the power to tell the president of the United States whether he can do this or not? That is a serious question. And depending on what side you're on, I know, this is, again, one of those things, the Democrats rush to the ramparts to say Trump's trashing due process. And, so they're basically defending the due process for people who are in the country illegally, some of whom have committed violent crime and are gang members. Once again, finding themselves on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue. But I do think it is an important question, and one that does need to get resolved, because Trump, you can't have these judges making these rulings constantly sort of trying to thwart the administration. In some instances, they may be proper, but in some instances, they may not be proper. And when they're not proper, that needs to be made clear. And the president, I think, has the right to disregard, and that obviously will send everybody into heads will explode across the media and across Washington.
Mine just did.
Yeah, Carl, I was watching your head explode.
Yeah, my head just exploded based on what Tom said. Listen, Tom used an interesting word. Do the judges have the power to do this? Well, apparently not. But do they have the constitutional authority to do it? Proper constitutional authority. So what happened is you had these people rounded up and take
just people. They're just people like you and me, Carl.
Well, I'll get to that in a minute. That's okay. Who they are
seems to me like a critical part of the issue.
Yeah, right? I agree. Okay. We'll get to that. Give you a second. But then the question, then the ACLU rushes into court and says this is not a lawful order. The president may be citing this old statutes, but there are still procedures that have to be followed. And a judge who's appointed by Barack Obama, I believe, but he's a very accomplished guy. Went to Yale. He teaches law. He teaches constitutional law. He's a very highly respected, very accomplished.
They all went to Yale, Carl.
He also was the head of the FISA court, Carl.
Well, yeah, I don't hold that against him. Maybe I should. But anyway,
you probably should.
But the point is that this is an accomplished jurist. It's not just some podunk magistrate. And he said, no. Well, I want to see more evidence, and he issues a stay just to try and prevent this from happening so he can really rule on it later. This process was already done. The planes were in the air about to take off. There's this, was this text? Was it the Salvadoran president who sent it to Marco Rubio? Oops.
Oops.
Yeah, oops.
Well, Haley.
Yeah, and that's not, that's oops is probably not the highest constitutional word, the last word on the subject from a constitutional standpoint. Tom points out that this is an 80-20 position. And by and large, I agree with him, and I agree with the 80% people. I don't think people have a right to be in this country illegally if they're committing crimes, even if they committed crimes before they got here. I just don't think we have to take those people. But you have 236 names. They're described as criminals or gang members. Well, how do we know they're all gang members? They were never apparently afforded the right to a lawyer. Is there a name or two on there that's a name of someone else? Is there a person who's believed to be in a gang, isn't? There's a person who wasn't a gang and is now informing on that gang for the FBI. I mean, this thing was done so precipitous. It's like all these things that the Trump administration is doing, that Elon Musk is doing, even if you agree with them, they seem to be done in haste.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of due process isn't just to go through a formality. It's to make sure that these people who, one of the reasons is to make sure they really are gang members and they really are criminals and they really are in the country illegally. But some of these Venezuelans were welcomed here by the Biden administration. Now, the Trump administration thinks that that was an unlawful order, that Joe Biden didn't follow the law. But these things have to be, it seems to me,
So
argued in a court of law or someplace. They can't just be middle of the night raids, take people. Oh, you're not supposed to be here. Well, who is that guy? We don't know. So I'm pretty uncomfortable with it. But Tom, what do you think?
well, there's a certain level. So the administration's homework has to be double checked by a judge before they can take any action whatsoever. I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
Is that how the government's supposed to operate?
yeah. Well, let's start with that. It's called, yeah, it's, yes, we don't have a police state, Tom.
Carl, these are not, let's not sort of, get into the hyperbolic, like these are, no knock raids in the middle of the night against innocent civilians. Okay. That's now, I'm not saying maybe there is, a name on there that shouldn't be on there. And certainly that is something that I think the administration has to do, as much due diligence as they can to make sure that folks who get caught up in this shouldn't be. But that doesn't mean that the administration therefore has no right to or no authority to deport people who are here illegally if they have committed crimes. I mean, it's just that seems like you can't run a country that way.
Well, I want to talk about this other case though quickly that was in the news. This Lebanese doctor who teaches at Brown University. She was flying back from Lebanon. She arrived at Logan Airport in Boston, was detained and deported despite having an H-1B visa and a job at Brown. And Tom, judges tried to intervene. Customs agents said that she had already left the country before they had heard from the judge. But and according to the AP, this is interesting. She is one of 3 transplant nephrologists. Those are doctors who specialize in kidneys in the entire state of Rhode Island. And now she's gone. So, it's one thing, I think, when we're talking about deporting criminals, and that may be an 80-20 issue. It's another when you're talking about deporting one of 3 kidney specialists in the state of Rhode Island, where there's 250 people apparently waiting for kidney transplants.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
give him the hard one, Andy. You gave him the easy one before.
I know. Well, look, okay, fine, fair. Like look, we have to take all of these on a sort of case by case basis. Was this potentially a mistake? Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to the specifics of that case to say, oh, they, and maybe they had already she was already, leaving the country before the judge was able to intervene. Let's just take them at their word that was true.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, look, it's not to say that mistakes aren't going to be made. That perfection is unattainable in anything we do. That's not a standard that we can necessarily hold people to, but that doesn't mean that it has to be the enemy of the good and that these agencies don't have the authority to do some of the things that they're trying to do.
Carl, you got 1 minute.
Well, I saw one news report that they found things in her phone that were glorifying Hezbollah, and that that they still saw her as a threat. And so but again, it seems to me she can be flagged, but I'd sure like her to be able to have a lawyer and be able to argue in court, and in open court. I'd like to see the evidence. Look, I'm with Tom. Basically, we have to control our borders, and we can't be, singling out people because they wear a headscarf. But if there's, pro-terrorist sympathetic stuff on our phone, Marco Rubio has spoken to that. Where coming to the United States is a privilege. It's not a right if you're not born here. And if you are pro-terrorist, it looks like the administration is going to or sympathetic to people who are perceived to be America's enemies. This administration is going to be stern about who it lets in and who it doesn't.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to have to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And Tom, the President Trump wrote on Truth Social that Biden's pardons of his family members and others are, in his words, void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because they were done by something called AutoPen. Tom, interesting legal theory here. What do you make of the president's case?
Well, as is typical with Donald Trump, I mean, he sort of makes these grand pronouncements. I don't know that he has the authority to revoke pardons that have already been issued. I'm not sure that's allowed under the Constitution. That might be litigated. But he does raise an important and interesting question, which is the use of, and we saw reports of this earlier, that a lot of things apparently, and we don't know how many things, and we don't know who authorized them, but that AutoPen, which is a sort of automatic signature of Joe Biden, was used for apparently these pardons and a bunch of other things. And the question is, who authorized it, and did Joe Biden know about it? Because we've talked repeatedly, it is not beyond the scope of imagination that there were, to use the Democrats' favorite phrase, unelected bureaucrats inside of the Biden administration that were running things and using AutoPen to give the signature and authority of the president of the United States to things that Joe Biden, either may not even have been aware of. And that's that is the most serious potential charge that you could make. And so I think we do need to get to the bottom of it. Again, the pardon thing, I know it's getting a lot of stuff about the J6ers, and Adam Schiff has already tweeted about it or whatever. But I think that the baseline question here is really important. What was the AutoPen used for? Who authorized it? And did Joe Biden know about it? We should get the answers to those questions.
Fair enough. But Carl, I would say that the one piece of legislation or one thing that he signed that he would know about is pardoning his son Hunter and his brother and other family members. That would be kind of top of mind, I would think.
But he also pardoned thousands of people, including some with criminal records, Andy, and we're talking about the J6ers and stuff. I mean, is it conceivable that he wasn't aware that that was part of the deal?
Carl?
Well, first of all, Tom, on St. Patrick's Day, no less, is called the former first lady an unelected bureaucrat. That's kind of hard on Dr. Jill, I think.
I did not mention Dr. Jill.
You said the people behind him were unelected bureaucrats, but she was really the force. So anyway.
I doubt she was the one who was operating the AutoPen, Carl.
Well,
I was thinking more along the lines of some staffers in the White House. But
depending on what Phil Wegman, our White House correspondent, finds out, because I've tasked him with, we may be discussing this tomorrow if it turns out that Donald Trump signed a lot of things with the AutoPen when he was president. But
he did. Apparently, they've already reported that there's 25 examples they found. So
okay, so those laws aren't valid either, I guess, then, according to Tom.
If he knew about them and authorized it, yes. That's the point.
The Department of Justice did say, this is the quote back in 2005, the president need not personally perform the physical act of affixing his signature to a bill he approves and decides to sign in order for the bill to become law. And I think that's interesting, but I think maybe that should be revisited entirely. I think they should actually have to sign these things. That's my view. But
I agree.
I want to move on to this gridiron dinner. It was this weekend. It was the 140th annual event. Saturday night. It's a white tie off-camera event. Features songs and skits by members of the press. This year, for the first time, they did not offer a toast to the sitting president. Carl, Trump was not there, and instead they paid tribute to the First Amendment. What do you make of your brethren in the press?
Well, the motto of the gridiron is the gridiron singes but never burns. And so it's supposed to be a night of teasing, bipartisan teasing. You mock the other side and you mock yourself. I've taken Tom once or twice to the gridiron. I'm not
once. I was there once.
I'm not a member. It's white tie. I don't own a white tuxedo. You have to rent it. Anyway, but President Trump was invited. And the president and J.D. Vance was invited, and all these top members of the cabinet were invited. They all declined. Some of them accepted, and then they began declining. So it was an orchestrated thing. I don't know orchestrated by whom. This one surprised me. I certainly don't blame the. I don't know how you're supposed to toast a guy who's basically told you to go pound sand and you're the enemy of the people. That in 2018, Trump went to this dinner, though. He never went to our dinner, the White House Correspondents Association dinner, the one I was president of that association. But he went to the Gridiron in 2018 and said, you know, there's some good reporters out there. Thank you, what you do. He made a toast after the teasing, the way presidents always do. And what prompted this, we don't know. But the Gridiron dinner, Trump declared war on it. And his 27-year-old press secretary said Friday that she wasn't going to the White House dinner. She announced this like it was news. Well, we already knew Trump wasn't going. So, now they've.
I mean, the White House Correspondents.
The White House Correspondents Dinner, which
the
is
nerd prom, yeah.
April 27th. I would never use that phrase, but
it's so apt. If you've ever been, it is so apt.
I would say, well, Andy's, I wonder how Oscars you won, Andy. I'm sorry. I call it our Academy Awards dinner. I could go with that.
Well, Tom, will you be attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year, now that you've learned that the White House is not going to be there?
I mean, no, I haven't gone for a few years. When we first started Real Clear Politics, it was when it was new and novel and interesting. I went to a few, and I got to meet, Russell Wilson was there one year, which I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan. That was awesome. Tony Romo and, the sports figures were more my bag, but I haven't gone in a few years. I think it has sort of, it got real popular during Bill Clinton when he invited all the celebrities, and that's when it kind of blew up into this place to be seen and all of that. The Gridiron, though, is different because it's not on camera. It is very insidery, and as Carl said, I mean, these reporters. They all dress up and do these stupid skits and sing songs. And I mean, it's kind of silly. But the report from last night's dinner, I mean, they said, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland said he made a jab. He said, if I actually want to be president, I wouldn't do any of this. Instead, I would take my case directly to the people who are in charge of our democracy, the Kremlin. So, it's not a great look when you've got the sort of the Beltway media, the insiders of all insiders sitting around yucking it up with like Russia collusion jokes. That is not, it's not helping their cause. They still don't get it. I just don't understand.
I think Tom just didn't want to put on a white suit for this thing. Otherwise, he would have been there.
Carl took me. I went one time. This was years ago, Carl. Geez, it was a long time ago. And we sat across the table from Bobby Jindal, who was the governor of Louisiana at that point in time. Mm-hmm. This is before he went to HHS, and had a lovely chat with him. I'd never met him before, and so it was a fine time. But that was years ago, and all of this stuff has gotten way politicized in the last 8 to 10 years.
Well, Andy, our dinner, the White House dinner, the one I go to,
the Correspondents' Dinner. You keep calling it the White House dinner. It's the White House Correspondents'
White House. White House Correspondents' Dinner. It has become. It seems. It has seemed to Republicans to be partisan. That the Gridiron Dinner, Tom read one joke, but there were jokes they made fun of the Democrats too. The Gridiron Dinner does a pretty good job of being even-handed. The rap on the White House dinner is that we used to do that and lost the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for us. And that didn't start with Donald Trump. I mean, the people you invite these liberal comedians who are, and in this day and age, you can go on social media and see all the stuff they've done. I mean, Stephen Colbert, he's barely a comedian. He's a, Democratic Party polemicist, really. And he one year went and made fun of Bush. And it was the dinner in 2011, I believe, where Seth Meyers and, Barack Obama just attacked Trump relentlessly for a long time.
That's how we got Donald Trump as president.
Yeah,
that's
twice.
Tom,
you know what, guys?
Tom can attest to this. I came back to the table after I ran up and talked to Trump briefly after that dinner. I came back to the table. I said, I have a very bad feeling about this.
All right. Well, Guys, we're going to have to leave it there. Just for the record, I do like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, I should say. So we're going to take a break. But when we come back, I'm going to talk to Jeff Gedmin. He's the head of the Middle East Broadcasting Networks. He's going to talk to us exclusively about his reaction to the Trump administration's plan to gut VOA, Radio Free Europe, and all the other public diplomacy agencies, one of which he runs. So don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Waldworth, and our next guest is Jeff Gedmin. He is the president and CEO of the Middle East Broadcast Networks. It's one of several international networks that operate under the umbrella of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which over the weekend was the target of an executive order signed by Donald Trump calling for the elimination of the agency and its constituent parts, which include the Voice of America and the radio network that Jeff runs. So Jeff, I imagine this is a busy day for you. Thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the program.
Happy to be with you. Thank you, Andy.
So let's just start with the state of play right now. The New York Times reports that the VOA, that their broadcasts in Asia and the Middle East have gone silent or are just playing music. What's happening on your network, which, as we said before, covers the Middle East?
Happily, Andy. So VOA is part of the federal government, and they've gone silent. They've gone dark. They're federal government. Company I'm running right now, Middle East Broadcasting Networks, television, digital, Arab Middle East, is not part of the federal government. It's a grantee of the federal government. And we received on Saturday morning from Kari Lake, the president's advisor, what's called a termination of our grant agreement. What that means for us is her and the federal agency's intention to close us down. We want to have a conversation about that with her, with the Congress, perhaps with outside counsel too, as to why this, why now, and whether it's entirely lawful. So that's where we are. But today, on Monday, St. Patrick's Day, we're operating Bureaus of the Middle East, headquarters in Springfield, Virginia.
Excellent. So the show goes on, at least for now. So what the administration is doing, I guess, is trying to terminate your grant, or have notified you that they've terminated your grant. But my understanding is that in the budget that was passed on Friday, your grant was approved. So what explains what happened in 12 hours or 24 hours?
Well, that's a great question, Andy. It is my view that this is part of a larger argument and battle in Washington right now, where the President of the United States, in my judgment, wants to expand executive authority, diminish the role of the Congress, and challenge courts, if I may say. And we're now part of that larger argument. So what happened? Congress passes on Friday night a continuing resolution, which in effect says, and did say, you all, we want to fund you through the end of the calendar year. Point one. Point two, Kari Lake, the advisor to the president who functionally leads USAGM, says Saturday morning, no, you don't. We've got it from here. We're going to kill you, in layman's language. Now, in my judgment, there are two problems with that. One is congressional intent. You alluded to that. And other, well, I'm not an attorney, but our grant agreement, I'm told, can be canceled if we're in material breach of the agreement. But we're not, and it wasn't alleged. So you see already it's a political problem, it's a legal problem, but also, if I may say, for those who are concerned about the role we play in the world, there's a intellectual political argument here at play too.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, Jeff, I've known you for a number of years. You're one of the most serious thinkers about foreign policy that I know. And I just think you are sort of uniquely qualified. You're in the middle of this, but you can also step back and just look at what is the role of public diplomacy, as we call it, in today's era. And are the radios and the television stations run by federal government under U.S. Under this, what used to be called U.S. Information Agency, I guess. What's their role right now, and can it be done more successfully than it is being done right now?
So to the first point, Andy, it is changing rapidly, technically, and technology is playing a major role, central role. We know all that. I think the question is, if you see these as instruments aligned with the broad foreign policy objectives of the United States, can you do this entirely with the private sector? My conclusion is no. So then, what role for government? And I think you can quibble and quarrel and argue about that. My view is that if you're setting this up today from scratch, it probably wouldn't look like this, actually. That's the truth. But my argument to Kari Lake and the Congress, insofar as we have naysayers over on the Hill, is reform, yes, restructure, yes, if you wish, reduce, yes, but I wouldn't eliminate it lock, stock, and barrel. And if I did move in that direction, I'd want a much more deliberative process and a lot more due diligence. This feels like an act of urgent what? Good heavens, I shouldn't say the word vandalism, but it doesn't sound terribly reflective and strategic to me.
And have you talked to Kari Lake about this? And if you haven't, what would you say to her?
I would say I have not. She's declined to meet with me and the president CEO of RFERL and Radio Free Asia, all multi-platform, all digital, even though these old-fashioned names. I would say, Kari, we're open to reform, we're open to restructure, we're open to efficiencies and reduction, but come visit. Meet the editors, meet the producers, meet the journalists, look at the audience research, look at the impact we're having, and if we together want to work it and improve it, we're so open to that conversation. But meet, listen, learn, study first, I'd say.
Yeah. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Jeff Gedmin. He is the president and CEO of the Middle East Broadcast Networks. Are you surprised at all that Kari Lake, who came in with as a broadcaster and seemed to be someone who was supportive of the mission, at least, has done a 180 on this?
A little bit. I think she's been in the job about 2 weeks, and I certainly sympathize with her campaign to get after waste and fraud and abuse and make things more efficient and impactful. I'm a little bit surprised at the suddenness of the decisions on Saturday, the decision she made after Congress decided that Congress wanted to fund us. And I'm a little bit surprised as a journalist. She is in what seems to be, I'm making some assumptions here, a lack of curiosity about who we are, what we do, and how we operate. This NBN, it's one of several. This is a company filled with intelligent, responsible, experienced, qualified people here and across the region who believe in America and believe in American values. Meet with them, hear them out first.
And what has been the reaction from our adversaries overseas?
Alarming and predictable. And I laugh because it's so painful. So for NBN, we are monitoring and we see, lo and behold, that Iranian-backed militia, for example, in Lebanon and in Iraq are celebrating. They say, we knew the Americans are feckless and unreliable and opportunistic. We knew that they don't stick to things. And for the people who work for them, we know they betray them and leave them vulnerable on the field. Well, predictable, alarming, and I think tragic.
And let's talk about the Hill then for a minute. People have gone after the radios before, but there's been a pretty strong bipartisan consensus that they should continue on the Hill. Are you getting any signals from the Hill that someone will ride to the rescue?
I don't know. I'm looking for that rescue, Andy. But we have a number of strong allies on the Hill on both sides of the aisle. There's no doubt about that. But think of the pieces of the puzzle. So number one, there are 100 things going on, pressing, compelling, and big. That's number one. Number two, the Hill is the Hill, and its interaction with the White House is its interaction with the White House. But somewhere in the background, or somewhere is part of this theater piece or opera is Doge, right? That's Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency. This letter from Kari Lake came on a Saturday after Doge had been at USAGM for 2 weeks. because they operate, in my view, in opacity, not in transparency, what role do they play in advising separate from Congress and separate from the administration and separate but related to Kari Lake? We don't have a window on it, but it comes into play somehow. So Congress, I think there's considerable support. Otherwise, they would have decided we're not in the continuing resolution on Friday. They would have just said, zero these guys out. They didn't. So there is support there. We have to translate it into action and influence and transaction.
So we've got about a minute left here, but I just want to know from your point of view, because you've been there, what, under a year now, 11 months, I think, something like that. And you have put in reforms. You've moved to streamline. You've sort of anticipated, I think, some of the management issues that people have identified. Just tell us quickly what you've done in the last 11 months that you think helped correct the ship, and why it should continue.
Andy, thank you. So I think editorially, we're picking our game up. We're doing a good job. We're telling the American story in ways that private media and independent social media activists can't quite do. And indeed, thank you for saying that. On the reform side, here, 11 months on the job, we did a first restructure in the fall. We let, I'm sorry, it's painful, we let 200 colleagues go. We ended physical presence of a number of bureaus in the region. We reduced our workforce by 25%. We saved the American taxpayer $20 million. We can do more. We can be efficient, even more impactful. Indeed, if I may say at this point in the conversation, we'd like a little credit. You know, I'm not going to say we were Doge before Doge, but we were cutting, restructuring, and I'll tell you, we did it strategically and humanely as possible.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Been talking with Jeff Gedmin. He is the head of the Middle East radios. Let me get that name straight. It's the Middle East Broadcast Network. So I want to make sure we got that right. Jeff, thanks for being here. And thank you for listening. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, joined now by Nicole Russell. She is a columnist for USA Today. Nicole, thanks for joining the program. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So we carry your columns on Real Clear Politics from time to time, and we're carrying one in our afternoon update today that you wrote this morning about the economy, saying essentially, listen, it's time for perspective, not panic. Give me your sense. Why do you think there is panic, and why should people not be worried?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's pretty clear right now that the markets are struggling. The S&P 500 dropped more than several percentage points, almost to a correction level, causing a lot of people to worry about their investments. At the same time, you have President Donald Trump instituting tariffs and kind of going back and forth on those and trying to figure out what they're going to be. And so I think the stock markets are responding and fluctuating and causing some panic among people who have investments.
But why should, I mean, you make the argument that, look, markets do fluctuate and it's all going to work out in the end. And what gives you the confidence to say that, there are better days ahead?
Sure. Well, for starters, stock markets always go up and down, right? We've experienced this so many times before. Even in 2022, I mentioned in my column that the S&P 500 dropped more than 25 percentage points, but it rebounded again in 2023 and 2024. So this is really common. I don't think Trump ever campaigned on, keeping the stock market at a steady upward pace. That's impossible. And so I think what we have to do as Americans who are invested and who are working here and want a better economy for everyone is to sort of look at the long game, look at the bigger picture. Trump has only been in office, a couple of months. And so we need to give his tariffs some time, several years, to create better jobs here. That's the point of the tariffs. They're going to increase manufacturing. They're going to produce more goods here in America, which will hopefully drive wages higher. And so in the long term, if you can hold on to your investments, try to calm your panic down, I think the stock market is going to go back up just like it always does. And I think that the things Trump is doing to try to improve the economy are going to work out in the long term.
You mentioned in your column, Trump, when stock markets go down, he gets blamed. When they go up, he doesn't get the credit for them. Although he does himself, and he did this in his first term, and people commented on this like, look, you live by the talking about the market, you can die by talking about the market, because he used to brag about how the markets were going up and up. And obviously that's part of his shtick, right? He's going to be the most successful president ever in history. So he's kind of played into this, that when he takes credit or took credit for the market going up, he's going to get credit when the market goes down. Right. And I think that's just part of it. It may be fair, it may not be fair, but certainly when it comes to Trump, he invites people, because if the markets were going up, he would absolutely be taking credit for
totally
them,
true.
right?
This is very Trump. It's going to be the best market, the most beautiful market. I can see him saying that. I know he does want to take credit. This is always going to be Trump's style. I don't love that personally. I wasn't even very pro-Trump before he took office. So I think, we should expect him to beat his chest when it's going well. And if it's not going well, I don't expect him to take the blame. The point I made in my column, I think you're alluding to, is that I do see an incredible double standard with the left here. We had 4 years of President Biden doing all kinds of things that didn't help our economy. Obviously, presidents don't control the stock market. They don't control our economy, but he ran our deficit up about $2 trillion. Our national debt soared to $36 trillion under Biden. We had inflation at a 40-year record high. People remember the prices of their everyday groceries just skyrocketing. And nobody seemed to mention this. It was like the entire left and the mainstream media, of whom I realize I'm a part, they acted like they didn't see it. They had amnesia. They were living in La La Land. And so now here we are. Trump hasn't even had 100 days. And everybody's like, well, how come the price of my eggs isn't going down? How come the economy is fluctuating? And it's like, I'm glad you finally are seeing some things, but why is it that Biden didn't get any blame for increasing the deficit or for the skyrocketing inflation? But then Trump's in office less than 3 months and everyone's blaming him for everything. So I just don't think we can have, I just wanted the left and a lot of the members of the media to just let's put credit, if we're going to criticize, if we're going to criticize Trump, say for tariffs, and people don't agree with tariffs, why didn't we criticize Biden when he was doing the things he was doing that was increasing inflation and increasing our deficit?
Well, you're not going to get any argument from me on a double standard in the media, but there is this, look, their politics is about perception. Perception is reality. And we've had multiple discussions on this show about, how long does Trump get before he owns this economy? He's probably still in that honeymoon phase where he can blame stuff on Biden, and Lord knows, Biden was blaming stuff on, Trump's first term for a couple of years. Obama did it. He blamed Bush. This is a standard thing. So but how long do you think Trump has before he actually has to start owning some of this stuff? I mean, how long would the market fluctuations, if it goes on another 2 weeks, 2 months, at what point does Donald Trump own the economy fully?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good question. And you are correct to point out everyone does this. Even when Biden took over our economy, I know I've written several columns explaining that inflation initially began because of Trump and because of the stimulus via COVID. So I think that is normal. Every president does do it. As far as how long I think we should give Trump, I'm not an economist. I want to make that really clear to my people who are going to rage email me. But I would give him at least a year. I'm not talking weeks. I think for tariffs to shake out, and I think for some of this deficit to go down because of Doge, I think that will actually take many, many months. I don't know that the stock market is going to fluctuate that whole time. I don't think everyone needs to panic that things are going to be in a nosedive forever. But I do think for things to adjust to the things that Trump is trying to do, particularly Doge, ripping some aspects of the federal government that are fraudulent and full of waste, for all of that to shake out, for all of those jobs to shake out, and for tariffs to figure out, where things are at there, I think that will take many, many months. And I do think that's fair when you look at the fact that he has 4 years to try to improve things.
We're speaking with Nicole Russell. She's a columnist for USA Today. Nicole, we've just got a couple minutes left. And, the next question is, well, I think the economy was clearly, and inflation was the number one issue in the election. I mean, it's what most people thought of when, yes, immigration was an issue, some of the culture stuff, but by and large, in all of the polling, if you believe the polls, it was pretty clear that Trump was elected to fix the economy. People were unsatisfied with the way Joe Biden had handled it. So that being said, as you look ahead, midterms will be happening in 2026, very slim margins, particularly in the House, but also in the Senate. And if Trump can't fix the economy, if he doesn't get credit for it or whatever, Republicans will be, he's taking a big risk, I think, because, he risks losing the House of Representatives to Democrats. And then where will that leave him? So this is a bit of a high wire act. Do you agree?
I do think it is risky for a couple reasons. And the biggest one is that I think a lot of people don't understand economics. They know they want the economy to be good. They want to live in a thriving America. But I don't think people know how it happens. I don't think people fully understand free market concepts. And so I think when they see something like tariffs, or they see something like Doge, particularly with the legacy media's help, you see widespread panic, right? So people are not understanding that, for example, if you strip the federal government of agencies and jobs where people are not really working, and there's all kinds of waste and fraud, that is actually going to be a good thing long-term for their economy. And I think a lot of people just don't, I think it looks a little like chaos. I've said that in many, many columns, that Trump has had a hard time explaining that. And so it looks chaotic. And so I don't know how long people's patience will last. I hope that they can see the long game, the long-term progress. I do think Doge will be a big part of it. And I do hope, not just because I'm a Republican, but because, I'm an American raising a family. I also want my own prices to go down. I also want inflation to go down. So I do think these things will work. I don't know how much, length that people will give Trump, especially in midterms, but I hope they can at least sort of look back at Biden's economy and go, well, what he was doing there wasn't working. So let's give Trump a chance to see if these very radical changes I have never thought of or seen in my lifetime, let's see if they really suss out and see if they can improve things now.
All right, last question, because you mentioned the chaos. And so, do you think even not even like, well, I guess it's 2020 hindsight, but not even, we're just talking a few weeks here looking back, as we get further ahead, could Trump have done this, but done it differently in a way that was either more organized or less chaotic, or would have created less panic, or given, let's say, the media and the Democrats less opportunity to exploit some of these policies that he's putting in place? Has he, could he have done this better?
That's a good question. I thought about that a lot, and I kind of go back and forth. Sometimes I think there might be a method to the madness. When I see Elon Musk and what he's doing with Doge, honestly, this feels like Elon Musk's side gig. This is someone who has changed the way that we pay for things. With PayPal, he has changed space exploration. He has changed X entirely, formerly known as Twitter. So sometimes I think, well, he seems a lot smarter than me, and maybe there is a plan and something up his sleeve for this. I do think, so I have some trust in that, in his intelligence, and the fact that he's parallel parking rockets in the sky. So maybe stripping the federal government of waste is not a big deal for him. But that said, as far as optics go, because you're right, perception is often American people's reality. I think they could have done a little better in explaining some of this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. here are the reasons, here's the method, here's the pace. Good example is Elon Musk's email to, federal government employees saying, please send me 5 things that you did last week. I loved that. I could name you 5 things right now. But people didn't realize that it wasn't a progress report. It was a pulse check. He was trying to figure out, is everybody alive? Is your heart beating? Are you checking your email? Are you doing something productive? He didn't say that until later, so it did cause panic. I'm for some of those radical changes, but I do think that they could have explained things a little more clearly, because you're right. When they do things in this way, it kind of does give Democrats, a bit of a wedge. They don't need it, right? They already want to do that. They're already ready, to pounce, So they don't. I wish they hadn't given them such an opportunity. And I think if there is a method to the madness, which I hope there is, and I think there is, I wish that would have been explained more upfront, a little more clearly, just to stave off some of that criticism.
All right. We will have to leave it there. Nicole Russin, columnist for USA Today. Nicole, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And that's going to do it for us. On behalf of Andy and Carl, I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Good night.